Jack stood in the dimly lit conference room and listened to the urgent transmission. The voice on the speaker crackled and told of a planet called Virius. Its star was dying fast. The surface would collapse soon? Jack felt a knot of worry in his stomach. He had seen many rescue missions fail. Still, he could not ignore the call for help. Daniel glanced at Jack from across the table. Grace shifted in her seat beside him. They were his team. Daniel was an engineer who could fix almost anything. Grace was a skilled pilot with steady hands. Together they had faced danger before. Tonight they would face something new. Jack rose and spoke with calm resolve. He said he would lead the rescue mission. His voice was quiet but firm. The council looked at him with concern. They wondered if he understood the risk. They knew the star's energy was unstable. A single quake could destroy their ship. Still, Jack did not hesitate. The council warned him. They said he had no guarantee of lives saved. The children on Virius were small and frightened. They hid underground. Their tunnels might collapse at any moment. The council asked for more time to plan. Jack shook his head. There was no time. He asked for the coordinates. He asked for supplies. Daniel spoke next. He asked for extra power, cells and reinforced hull plating. He would modify the engines to handle extreme stress. Grace asked for navigation data. She wanted a map of the tunnels beneath Virius. The council agreed to the requests. They saw Jack's team was ready. After the meeting, the three walked down a long hallway. White lights flickered overhead. The walls hummed with energy. Jack checked his gear. He placed a small med kit at his belt. He secured a data tablet in his pocket. He felt the weight of responsibility. Grace touched his shoulder. She said she believed in him. Daniel gave a quick thumbs up. They boarded the shuttle. The engines roared to life. The shuttle lifted from the pad. Jack pressed his forehead against the glass. He watched the base shrink below. The journey to Virius was long but quiet. Jack and Grace took turns at the helm while Daniel ran system checks. They spoke little. Gravity felt different in the shuttle cabin. Jack thought of his home world. He thought of the children waiting in darkness. He felt a strong urge to help them. Eventually, the shuttle neared the planet. Jack saw a red glow on the horizon. The star's light was dim and flickering. He swallowed hard. He did not speak. He trusted Grace and Daniel to handle the final approach. As they dropped into orbit, alarms sounded. Sensors warned of radiation spikes. The ship trembled. Sparks flew from a control panel. Daniel rushed to secure loose cables. Grace adjusted their path to avoid debris. Jack held the railing tightly. The shuttle shuddered. Jack knew they were close to disaster. Still, he held fast. He watched the planet below. It was scarred with cracks and glowing fissures. The sight made his heart ache. After tense moments, they stabilized in orbit. The alarms died down. The shuttle floated in silent space, facing Virius. Jack felt relief wash over him. The mission had begun. He turned to his team and nodded. They were ready to descend. Jack activated the comlink and hailed the underground network beneath the planet's surface. There was no answer at first. He repeated the signal. At last, a faint voice replied. It was a child's voice. It trembled with fear. Jack spoke softly and told the child not to run. He said they would come for them soon. He asked the child to keep calm and stay in the tunnel entrance. The voice trembled again, but gave the position. Daniel prepared the shuttles. Cargo bay for landing. He loaded rescue pods and life support units. Grace plotted a course to the site. Jack gathered the supplies he would need. He checked the air tanks and medical supplies. In the shuttle cabin, the three shared a look. They knew the next hour would test them all. They braced themselves for what was to come. Outside, Virius glowed with dying red fire. Inside, Jack prayed they would succeed. Jack switched on the landing thrusters and guided the shuttle into a gentle descent. The walls of the tunnel closed around them as the craft moved through a broken gate. Red glow from the planet above lit the rough stone. The shuttle's landing. Legs touched the ground with a soft thud. Daniel opened the cargo bay door. A cool mist rose from the floor. Jack felt the air chill against his face. He checked the com link again. Ilara's voice came through, trembling but clear. She guided them deeper into the tunnels. Jack stepped onto the rocky ground. He felt the quake under his boots. Daniel and Grace followed him. Each carried a portable light. Together they walked into the dark passage. Ilara led them with quick small steps. Her skin was pale blue, shadows danced on her face. She paused at crushed support beams. She studied them and whispered in her soft alien tongue. Jack asked Grace if the beam could fall. Grace shook her head no, but said they must hurry. The tunnel walls were rough and damp. Water dripped from cracks above. Jack wiped the water from his brow. Daniel scanned the area with a handheld sensor. He said the air was low in oxygen. He set up extra filters on their masks. Jack kneeled and left a small beacon on the ground. He said it would mark their path back. Grace placed a second beacon further down. Within minutes, the soft lights formed a path behind them. Ilara led them to a collapsed section. A pile of rubble blocked the way. Behind it, faint voices of children whispered. Jack felt his heart squeeze. He placed a hand on Ilara's shoulder and said they would free her friends. Daniel pulled out a plasma cutter. He bent close to the beam. He cut away the metal frame holding the rocks. Sparks flew. Jack covered his face with an arm to shield from flying sparks. After a moment, Daniel moved the cutter aside and used a small tow cable to lift the rubble. The children's voices grew louder. Grace held a light high. A group of 5 small figures huddled behind a fallen beam. Their clothes were dusty. Their eyes were wide with fear. Most clutched each other. One little boy cried softly. Jack crouched and spoke in a calm voice. He said he was friend. He said he and his team came to help. The children stared at him. Then Ilara stepped forward and said, "In their tongue, they help us." Jack smiled gently and held out his hand. He used a universal translator to say, "You are safe now." The children paused. One tall girl took his hand. Her hair was silver white. She led her small group toward the light. Jack counted 6 children. He whispered to Daniel to scan for more tunnels. Daniel nodded and ran the scanner along the walls. The device beeped softly with each reading. After a moment, he said there might be 4 more hiding deeper in the tunnels. Jack looked at Ilara. He asked if the others were farther ahead. She nodded. She led the 6 children to a safe alcove. The alcove had a flat floor and enough space for the shuttle's life pods. Grace opened a life pod and turned on the oxygen. She helped the children. Step inside. The pods lit up around their heads. The children breathed easier. Some looked at Jack with gratitude in their eyes. Jack stood near the entrance and watched. He felt hope fill his chest. Then the ground shook. A loud crack echoed through the tunnel. Small rocks fell from above. Jack held up a hand to signal danger. Daniel rushed to the support beams. He said the quake had weakened the tunnel further. Ahead, he warned it might collapse at any second. Jack looked at Grace. She said they should get the children to the shuttle and leave. Jack turned to Ilara. He asked if she and the others could walk back. She shook her head. The elder had told the children to stay hidden until rescue came. They would not risk traveling alone. Jack knelt to her level and said, "We will carry you." He scanned the children. He picked up the small boy who cried earlier. The boy hugged Jack's neck. He was light in his arms. Daniel lifted 2 girls onto his back, one on each shoulder. Grace carried the tall girl by the hand. Ilara ran beside her friends and stayed close to Grace. Jack led the slow march back to the shuttle. Each step was cautious. The tunnel groaned with stress. A distant rumble warned of more collapse. Jack kept his head low. He guided them past the broken stones and toward the cargo bay. Suddenly a loud crack split the air. A large stone fell near them. Daniel rolled and pushed one child aside. Grace shouted. Jack covered the children with his own body. He felt the impact on his back. A moment later, the tunnel fell silent. Dust settled around them. Jack rose slowly. The children were safe. Their eyes were wide. Ilara hugged his leg. Grace rushed to check on Daniel. Daniel smiled weakly and gave a thumbs up. Jack helped the children into the shuttle's bay. Grace closed the door. He called to Dr. Duncan on the refuge station. He said they had the children and would launch soon. The station confirmed and switched on the guidance beacon. Jack secured the children in their seats. He handed each an emergency blanket. They held the blankets close, breathing in the warm air. Ilara wrapped her arms around the small boy. Her face was calm now. Jack and his team ran final checks on the shuttle's engine. Daniel patched the damaged hull plating near the bay door. Grace set the shuttle to launch mode. Jack looked at the children. They were calm but tired. He felt relief and pride. He said softly, "We will take you home." Grace engaged the thrusters. The shuttle lifted from the tunnel floor. The tunnel walls blurred as they rose. Jack watched from a small window as the entrance slipped away. As they moved through orbit, Jack felt the shuttle jolt. He glanced at the engine readouts. A warning flashed. He swore under his breath. The power core was overheating from the quake damage. Daniel worked at the console. He said they needed to vent some power. Jack nodded. He said to open the auxiliary vents. Sparks flew from the side panel. Daniel connected manual coolant lines. RC held steady at the controls. She guided the shuttle away from the planet. The red glow shrank behind them. Jack monitored the temperature gauge. It slowly dropped to safe levels. After tense moments, the shuttle glided onto the refuge station's docking arm. Metal claws locked the shuttle in place. The station's lights welcomed them home. Jack opened the bay door. The children walked out, still holding their blankets. Station doctors greeted them. They led the children to a warm medical bay. Jack watched until the last child passed through the door. Then he closed the bay door and sat heavily in his seat. Grace and Daniel joined him. They exchanged tired smiles. Jack looked at the stars through the viewport. He thought of those still left on Virius. He knew more rescue would follow. He closed his eyes and rested for a moment. Tomorrow he would return. For now, he had saved 6 lives. Jack watched the life pods drift toward the refuge station before turning back to Virius. He sensed the planet's anger. Red flares lit the sky like warnings. He felt a weight in his chest. More children waited below. He and his team prepared the shuttle for a second descent. Daniel checked the engines and life support. Grace plotted a new course deeper into the tunnel network. Jack secured his harness and tested his comlink. This time, the tunnel entrance was farther away. The quake had widened cracks in the surface. Jagged rocks blocked parts of the path. Jack guided the shuttle carefully. The landing thrusters pushed dust and pebbles aside. Daniel opened the bay door. A gust of hot air from an unexplored chamber hit them. The tunnel walls glowed orange from nearby lava flows. Heat pressed against their suits. Jack stepped out first. He felt the heat through his boots. He looked into the shifting shadows. "He?" called out softly. "Anyone there?" A faint cry answered from ahead. Ilara's voice came again, guiding them. But this time it was different. It sounded weak. Jack's throat tightened. He signaled to Grace and Daniel. They followed the voice deeper. As they moved forward, the tunnel floor cracked beneath them. Grace lost her footing, but Daniel caught her arm. Jack held on to a nearby beam. They stayed close together as they advanced. After several tense minutes, they reached a wider cavern. It had a rough stone floor and a low ceiling. Glowing veins of heated minerals ran along the walls. Jack saw 2 children lying near a broken water pipe. One child held the other, whose breathing was slow. The 2 were pale green in skin. Jack knelt beside them. He took out a medkit and opened it. He scanned the injured child. Grace looked for danger. She kept her light trained on the tunnel's mouth. Daniel climbed onto a small ledge and found a shut-off valve. He twisted it and fixed the water flow. Fresh air hissed from a repair kit. The air around the children cooled. Jack used his med tools to check the child's pulse. The child was still alive but weak. Jack whispered, "You must hold on." He applied bandages and gave the child a small dose of stimulant. The child's breathing slowed but steadied. The child opened its eyes. They were dark and full of fear. Jack smiled and said, "We will get you back." The child nodded weakly. Ilara and 2 other children crept from the shadows. They stared at the scene. Ilara's eyes shone with tears. Jack gently told them to help carry their friend. The taller girl bent to lift one arm. The smaller children took the child's legs and helped. Jack and Daniel steadied the weight. Together they carried the injured child toward the shuttle. Grace guided them back through the narrow tunnel. Each step was slow and careful. The ceiling dripped hot steam. They ducked under low passages and climbed over broken rock. Halfway back, the ground roared. A pillar of stone collapsed behind them. Jack felt the heat of falling rocks. He urged the group forward. Grace checked the map and found a side passage. Jack led them through. The side passage sloped upward. Faint light from the surface shone. Through cracks. Eventually, they reached an open cavern. From above, they saw the shuttle's lights. Jack smiled with relief. They hurried to the shuttle. Daniel opened the bay door. Grace cooled the air with external vents. The injured child was placed into a life pod. Ilara and the others watched anxiously. Jack scanned for more survivors. Daniel used the scanner but found no more signals. Jack called the refuge station and said they had another child in need. He requested an emergency medical team. Grace brought the shuttle into orbit again. Jack stayed close to the life pod. He patted the small shell and whispered, "We are almost safe." The journey back was tense. The star's red glare was stronger. Now, alarms warned of unstable orbit. Daniel and Grace worked quickly. After tense minutes, the shuttle docked at the station. Medics rushed to take the child. Ilara ran with them, holding her hand. Jack and his team watched until the child was in safe hands. The medbay doors closed behind them. Jack felt both joy and sadness. Grace exhaled and said, "We saved another." Daniel nodded, though his face was drawn with worry. Jack looked at the viewport. Virius glowed like a dying ember. He whispered, "I have to go back." Grace shook her head and said, "Not yet." "Rest," Daniel said. "You need strength." Jack closed his eyes. He thought of the children still waiting. He thought of his homeworld's council. He knew they would send more ships. But for now, only he could go back. Jack stood and looked at his team. He said, "We will rest for a moment. Then we go again." They nodded. Together they prepared for what lay ahead. Jack leaned back in his seat and closed his eyes for a brief moment. The refuge station hummed around him. Soft lights pulsed with life support cycles. He felt the weight of his next descent pressing on his mind. He and his team needed rest, but also knew time was short. Grace spoke first. She said she would run final diagnostics on the shuttle's engines. Daniel agreed to inspect the hull plating around the cargo bay. Jack nodded. He would prepare their gear and check the life support units again. After a quick meal in the stations. Mess hall, the three returned to the shuttle. Jack wiped his hands on a rag and looked at the orange glow through the viewport. Virius's atmosphere still burned with unstable heat. Daniel ran his hands along the hull. He tapped at damaged panels from the quake. He said he would reinforce weak spots with spare plating from the station. Grace checked her flight suit and updated the navigation charts. Jack stocked the med kit with extra bandages, stimulants, and water. SACHETS. As they prepared, Ilara appeared at the shuttle's airlock. She held a small folded cloth in her hands. Jack recognized the patterns on the fabric. It matched the design of the children's village near the tunnels. Ilara stepped close and held out the cloth. Jack took it and unfolded it gently. Inside was a simple drawing of the children's handprints in bright colors. Ilara's handprint was the largest, in pale blue. The other children's prints surrounded hers. Jack felt emotion rise in his chest. Daniel and Grace gathered around to look. Grace said softly, "They made this for you." Jack smiled and said, "Thank you, Ilara." "I will keep it safe." Ilara nodded and turned to leave. Jack called her back and said, "We will bring them more children home." Ilara's eyes shone with hope. Jack closed the airlock and checked the seals. The hiss of pressurized air stopped. Grace fired up the engines and set a descent trajectory. Daniel monitored the life support and hull integrity gauges. Jack reviewed the coordinates for the next rescue site. This time, they aimed for a deeper cavern system near the planet's equator. The tunnels there were more complex. They held many children who had stayed behind after the first quakes. Jack hoped to find at least 10 more alive. The shuttle entered atmosphere at high speed. The red sky burned like embers. Jack held onto the railing as G-forces pressed him into the floor. Grace adjusted the thrusters to steady the descent. Daniel watched the telemetry and gave thumbs up. The shuttle descended through thick clouds of ash and dust. Visibility was low. Grace switched to thermal imaging. Jagged mountain peaks loomed below. The landing zone was a rocky plateau surrounded by collapsed tunnel entrances. The shuttle's landing legs touched down with a loud thud. Dust and debris billowed around the craft. Jack unbuckled his harness and opened the cargo bay doors. Cold air from deep within the tunnels met the hot ash from above. Jack stepped onto the rocky ground. He felt the air press on his lungs. The mask filters hummed. Grace followed him, carrying a portable light. Daniel brought up a handheld scanner and waved it in a circle. The scanner beeped rapidly. Life signs were strong in several directions. Jack said they should spread out in groups. He and Ilara would go left. Grace and Daniel would go right. They set small beacons along the ground to mark their paths. Jack and Ilara moved through a low tunnel. The walls glowed faint blue from bioluminescent minerals. Water dripped from the ceiling. Jack heard faint whispers ahead. He motioned to Ilara to move quietly. A small chamber opened before them. It held a makeshift camp of children. They sat around a shallow pool from a leaking pipe. Some children lay on the ground, weak from hunger. Others looked up in fear at the newcomers. Jack kneeled and put down a medical pack. He spoke softly and told them he was there to help. He opened a food capsule and offered it to a small girl with green skin. She took it slowly and ate with trembling hands. Ilara spoke in her language, comforting the children. Jack used the universal translator to tell them to stay calm. He said he and his team would guide them to safety. Daniel's single quotes voice crackled over the comlink. He said he had found another group near a collapsed tunnel entrance. Grace added that she had located life pods in the shuttle bay ready for launch. Jack gathered the more injured children into his arms. Their limbs were weak, but they clung to him. 2 older children helped carry blankets and small bags of supplies. Together, they retraced their steps to the shuttle. Outside, Grace and Daniel had already cleared debris from the cargo bay. The life pods were in place. Ilara ran ahead to assist. Jack and the children reached the shuttle. Grace called out to lift off quickly. Jack boarded the shuttle with them. As the cargo bay doors closed, Jack saw the ground tremble. A pillar of rock near the tunnel mouth collapsed in a cloud of dust. Inside the shuttle, the children were in the life pods. Jack checked each to make sure they were secure. One little boy looked at him with large eyes. Jack smiled and said, "You are safe now." The boy nodded and held his hand. Grace engaged the thrusters. The shuttle lifted off the plateau. Below them, the red dust swirled like a storm. Jack watched the scene through a small window. His heart pounded with relief and worry. In orbit, Jack called the refuge station. He said they had rescued 10 more children. He arranged for medics to meet them. The station confirmed and opened the docking arm. As they approached the station, Jack felt a sharp pain in his side. He looked down and saw a small dent in his suit's plating. A piece of hot rock had grazed him during takeoff. Daniel rushed over with emergency tools. He pried open the suit's outer panel and saw a burn on Jack's torso. Jack gritted his teeth but stayed calm. Daniel patched the suit and sealed it. He said Jack would need treatment once docked. Grace docked the shuttle. Medical officers were waiting. They carried Jack to the infirmary and treated his burn. He lay on a cot while they cleaned and dressed the wound. He felt weak but relieved. Ilara and a group of children stood outside the infirmary. She held a small gift basket filled with colorful stones from Virius. Quietly, she entered and placed it on Jack's bedside table. Jack opened his eyes and smiled. Ilara said, "Thank you," in her gentle voice. Jack nodded and said, "We will finish this. We will save them all." Ilara's eyes shone with hope as she left the room. Jack closed his eyes and thought of Virius's tunnels. He knew danger still waited. He also thought of his own life. The next descent would be harder. The star's power core was now unstable. The shuttle engines ran hotter than before. He sighed and reached for his data tablet. He updated the list of remaining children. Grace and Daniel stood by the doorway. They were ready to continue the mission. Jack sat up and said, "Let's rest for a moment. Then we go back. They need us." Grace nodded. Daniel smiled. The mission was far from over. Outside the infirmary's window, the refuge stations. Lights glowed in the silent void. Jack knew that soon he would return to the burning world below. For now, he drew strength from the hope in the children's eyes and the promise he made to Ilara. Jack woke to the steady hum of the refuge station. The glow from the corridor lights seeped under the infirmary door. He sat up slowly and pressed his hand to the bandage on his side. The pain was dull, but it was there. He took a deep breath and stood. Grace and Daniel were waiting outside. Their faces showed relief to see him awake. Daniel gave a quick nod and Grace offered a small smile. Jack rubbed the back of his neck and said, "I'm ready." They returned to the shuttle. The craft sat quietly at the docking arm. Its hull bore fresh plating from Daniel's repairs. Grace ran a final systems check, moving her fingers over the console. Jack secured his helmet and verified the life pod. Controls. As they prepared to depart, Ilara appeared with a small group of children. She held a data tablet displaying new coordinates. Jack checked the tablet and nodded. These tunnels were deeper and more unstable. They led to the largest underground colony of children. Jack knelt to meet Ilara's gaze and said, "We will save them all." Ilara nodded and turned away to guide the children back into the station's safe hold. Jack and his team boarded the shuttle. Grace engaged the thrusters. The shuttle detached from the station and slid into space. Jack checked the navigation feed, following Ilara's coordinates. Daniel monitored the hull temperature. All readings were normal. Soon, the red glow of Virius returned. Jack stared at the dying star with sadness. He whispered, "This world is losing life." He then focused on the mission. Descending into the atmosphere, they passed through ash clouds. The shuttle rattled from turbulence. Grace guided them through the worst of it. Finally, the shuttle breached the lower atmosphere and approached the surface near a wide fissure. This landing zone had collapsed walls and jagged rocks. The shuttle landed with a heavy jolt. Jack felt the impact in his bones. He opened the cargo bay doors and activated the external lights. Daniel brought out a portable scanner. It beeped loudly, detecting life deep below. Jack and Grace readied the life pods and supplied them with extra oxygen. Jack strapped on a pack of medical supplies. Jack stepped onto the dusty ground. He felt the heat and smell of burnt rock. Grace followed, holding a light. Daniel stayed by the shuttle, running the scanner. Jack switched on his comlink. He spoke softly. "Ilara, can you hear me?" Static crackled. Then Ilara's voice answered, weak but present. She gave directions to a narrow tunnel far below. Jack and Grace climbed down a steep slope littered with fallen stones. Each step kicked ash into the air. Jack paused to catch his breath and looked back at the shuttle's lights far above. He felt the weight of responsibility again. The tunnel entrance was narrow. Grace bent at the waist and led the way. Jack followed, crouching under low rock. The tunnel walls were slick with moisture. Their lights reflected off wet stone. Ilara single quotes S voice guided them deeper. The tunnel opened into a vast cavern. Glowing crystals lit the ceiling in a soft glow. Below them, dozens of children huddled near hot springs that rose from cracks in the floor. Jack's single quotes S heart ached at the sight. The children's clothes were tattered. Their skin was pale from lack of sun. Some lay on the ground, weak and trembling. Others stared at Jack and Grace with frightened eyes. Jack knelt and opened his medical pack. He offered water supplements to a small girl who shook with fever. Grace spoke gently and told the children they were there to help. She opened another life pod and activated the oxygen flow. Jack and Grace moved among the children, helping them onto the life pods. Each pod lit up and the children breathed easier. Some smiled with gratitude, tears in their eyes. Daniel's voice came over the comlink. darker this time. He said more life signs were behind a blocked passage to the left. The scanner readings were faint but persistent. Jack looked at the high wall blocking the way. He placed a hand on the cool stone and studied the cracks. He called Daniel and asked for a plan. Daniel suggested using the shuttle's emergency thrusters to create a controlled blast and break the wall. Jack hesitated. Too much force could collapse the entire cavern. Jack thought of the children beyond. He turned to Grace and said, "We have to try." She nodded, trusting him. Jack keyed the thruster controls on his comlink. A distant rumble followed. Small stones fell from above. A crack formed in the wall. Jack and Grace backed away. The wall collapsed inward in a controlled collapse, revealing a smaller chamber beyond. Dust billowed, and they shielded their eyes. When the dust settled, Jack saw more children huddled in the darkness. They looked at the light and ventured forward. Some limped on injured legs. Jack could see fear and hope in their faces. Jack rushed forward and guided them to the life pods. Grace helped the injured, carrying a small boy wrapped in a blanket. Jack placed the last two children onto the open pods. As the children settled, the cavern shook violently. A pillar of rock cracked above them. Jack shouted for Grace to evacuate. They sprinted back toward the tunnel entrance. Behind them, the cavern began to collapse. Jack felt the ground tremor under his boots. He grabbed the last life pod and placed it in his arms. He stumbled but kept going. Grace led the way, light bouncing off the tunnel walls. Just as they reached open ground, a massive rock fell behind them, blocking the tunnel entrance. Jack turned and saw dust clouds rise. He held up his free hand and called to Daniel. Daniel ran forward with a tow cable and hooked it to the pod Jack carried. With a loud mechanical whine, the shuttle's winch pulled the pod inside. Grace closed the cargo bay doors and engaged the thrusters. The shuttle lifted off as the tunnel entrance collapsed completely, sealing the cavern forever. Jack sank to his knees in the shuttle bay, breathing heavily. The children were safe. He looked at their pale faces as they rested in the pods. Some slept, some stared out the bay window. Daniel approached and placed a hand on Jack's shoulder. "You did it," he said. Grace nodded beside him. Jack looked up and said, "We did it together." They returned to orbit, and the refuge station prepared to receive them. Jack checked his side. His burn had reopened slightly. He winced, but said nothing. After docking, medical officers rushed in to help the children. Jack stepped out last and leaned against the wall. Ilara and other children surrounded him, offering comfort and small gifts. Jack closed his eyes and felt tears well. He had saved so many lives, yet Virius was dying. He whispered, "I wish I could save them all." Ilara placed her small hand on his arm. Grace put a hand on Jack's back. She said softly, "One mission at a time." Daniel added, "We rest." "Now, then go back." Jack nodded. He looked at the children moving toward care. The refuge station lights shimmered around them. Jack took one last breath of station air, then turned to prepare for what would come next. Jack awoke before dawn, the soft glow of station lights filtering through the window. His side throbbed where the burn had been treated. He rose slowly and dressed in his flight suit. Grace and Daniel were already at the shuttle bay, prepping. The craft. Grace looked up and gave him a reassuring smile. Daniel checked a datapad and nodded. Jack nodded back and stepped into the bay. The shuttle sat ready, its hull bearing the marks of their many rescues. This mission would be the last. The star's collapse was near. The Council had sent word. No more ships could risk the journey. Only one chance remained, to save as many children as possible now. Jack took a deep breath and said, "Let's go home to them." He activated the comlink. Ilara's soft voice answered, filled with hope. The shuttle detached and slid into space. Jack watched the refuge station's lights fade. He closed his eyes and thought of the children's faces. He held on to their memories like a shield. As they approached Virius, the sky glowed violently. The star's dying burst sent waves of heat through the atmosphere. Grace guided the shuttle through the flames, her hand steady on the controls. Daniel called out, "Shields at max. Engagements in 30 seconds." Jack nodded and checked the life pods. Each was sealed and stocked. He hoped they would hold. The shuttle pierced the atmosphere. Heat flared on the hull. Jack felt the G-forces push him into his seat. Grace adjusted the thrusters to steady the craft. Small alarms sounded as hull temperature climbed. After tense moments, the shuttle dropped below the ash clouds. Below them, the planet's surface was a battlefield of fire and collapse. Deep canyons cracked open and rivers of lava cut through the land. Jack keyed the comlink to Ilara. Her voice came through, weak but eager. She gave coordinates to a massive cavern system beneath an ancient ruined city. This was the largest colony of children, possibly hundreds. Jack swallowed. He looked at Grace and Daniel. They nodded, ready. Jack said, "We find them and get them out." The shuttle landed on a flat plateau near broken columns and stone arches. The sight of ancient ruins under the red sky felt like a dream. Jack opened the cargo bay doors. A wind of hot ash blew inside. GRCE, and Daniel moved quickly, setting up life pod launchers and assembling oxygen tanks. Jack checked the map of underground chambers. He found the main entrance beneath a collapsed temple floor. Jack activated a portable energy drill. He began to cut through the stone slab, blocking the entrance. Sparks flew and dust filled the air. Daniel and Grace helped clear the debris. After minutes of effort, a hole large enough to enter appeared. Jack removed his helmet briefly and whispered, "They are waiting." He put his helmet back on and switched on the comlink. Ilara single quotes S voice answered from below. She sounded closer than before. Jack climbed into the opening and shone his light downward. The tunnel stretched into darkness, lit by faint bioluminescent fungi. Jack descended first, followed by Grace and Daniel. The tunnel floor sloped gently downward. Walls bore carvings from a lost civilization. Jack studied them as they walked. Wondering about the people who built this place, after a long walk they reached a vast cavern. Torches of glowing crystals lit its ceiling in pale green. Below, thousands of children sat or lay on blankets. They looked up as the rescue team arrived. Jack's heart swelled at the sight. There were many, some older, some tiny. A hush fell over the cavern. The children stared in wonder at the humans. Jack knelt and spoke through his universal translator. "We are here to take you home," his voice echoed softly. Some children gasped, others began to whisper. Ilara stepped forward from the crowd. She wore a simple cloak of woven fibers. She held a staff with a glowing crystal on top. Her skin was pale blue, and her eyes held tears of joy. Jack stood and faced Ilara. She raised the staff, and the crystals in the walls pulsed. The children gathered around, moving toward the rescue pods set at the cavern's edge. Grace and Daniel helped guide the children. Each child climbed into a pod. Orbital lifters hovered at the cavern mouth, ready to carry the pods upward. The plan was to launch in waves. Jack watched as the first wave rose. Small lights drifted upward into the ash-filled sky. Each light was a child, saved. Jack held back tears and bowed his head. Ilara approached him and said, "We thank you." Jack shook his head. He said softly, "No, Ilara. You thanked me, but I saved only a few compared to your people." Ilara smiled and touched his hand. She said, "You saved every life you could. That is more than enough." Jack looked at her and nodded. The second wave prepared. Suddenly a tremor shook the cavern floor. Cracks formed in the walls. Jack shouted, "Launch now!" Grace activated the pod lifters. Dust and small rocks fell as each pod rose. Jack held onto a pillar, feeling the cavern collapse around them. He turned to help the last children into pods. Just as the final pod lifted, the cavern roof gave way. Jack dived toward the edge of the opening. Grace pulled him back with a tow. Cable. He grabbed the cable and was yanked upward. The shuttle bay doors opened above. Jack tumbled inside. He hit the floor hard and lay still. Moments later, he sat up. Daniel crouched beside him, checking his pulse. Grace hovered nearby, eyes wide with worry. Jack smiled weakly and said, "Did they all make it?" Daniel nodded. "Every pod launched. All children are safe." Jack exhaled deeply and closed his eyes, relief flooding through him. Grace helped him to his feet. They walked to the cockpit and set a course for the refuge station. Ilara's voice came over the comlink, praising them. Jack listened, feeling a warmth in his chest. As the shuttle left Virius's orbit, Jack looked back at the red planet. It glowed like a dying ember, beautiful yet tragic. He whispered, "Goodbye, Virius." He turned to his team and said, "We did it." Daniel placed a hand on his shoulder. Grace smiled. Together, they watched the shuttle jump to hyperspace, carrying the last of the alien children to safety. In the shuttle bay, the life pods drifted silently. Each held a child, safe and free. Jack knelt and touched one pod's glass. A small hand pressed against it from inside. Jack stood and looked at the stars. He thought of home and of the promise he made. He whispered, "Your home is safe now." Then he blinked, ready for rest and reflection. Far below, Virius's star finally collapsed, releasing a wave of light that disappeared in the void. Jack felt a tear slip down his cheek as he slept. The mission was over, and he had sacrificed all he could to save the young souls of Virius.